Dear colleagues, members of the European Parliament, Serbian deputies, dear guests, it is a pleasure to declare open our 7th meeting of our committee and to welcome all participants. On behalf of all our colleagues, MPs here in the Serbian Assembly, I express our pleasure to have our 7th meeting of our committee, which gives us an opportunity to discuss all relevant facts to Serbian European integrations. It is a special pleasure to welcome Daniel Erik Scher, Estonian ambassador to Serbia, who's representing Estonian presidency of the EU, then Mrs. Joksimovic, our Minister for European Integration, European Union Minister to Serbia, His Excellency Sam Fabrizi, and our dear guests and representatives of the EU member states' embassies. Very soon, the representatives of the EU institutions and Serbian government will inform us about the course of our EU negotiations and the planned activities. I can say that we are pleased with what we have achieved. There is a lot of work to do, of course, ahead of us, but this is a framework which provides us with an opportunity to talk about everything which is our wish and the wish and desires of our citizens. We are demonstrating the credibility daily. We are fulfilling our obligations that we have undertaken. The floor to welcome us, to greet us. Thank you, Mr. Kukan, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chairman, Madam Minister, Excellencies, the ambassadors, distinguished colleagues from Skupština, ladies and gentlemen. Let me make a small statement at the beginning of our deliberations. I will start with saying that Serbia is well advancing in the membership negotiations. We welcome the outcome of the last intergovernmental conference a week ago, when 2 new negotiation chapters were open. Many had hopes, or everybody had hopes, for more, as apparently more chapters are technically ready to be opened. However, in the entire enlargement process, we need to remember about a big picture. The big picture is that we want a strong, fair union with new countries inside, which are as close to a current member state as possible. This means not only a formal legislative build-up of the legal system based on acquis communautaire, it means letting into the family of democratic states a new partner who functions on strong principles of rule of law, a partner who is able to guarantee to be a home of free citizens who freely express their political will. A man or a woman who can count on free independent courts to judge about their rights, obligations, about their businesses, about their lives. A country where a person from a small town can trust that the court will be defending his right when he or she would end in a clash with a powerful company or in a conflict with the family of an official representing the government. A state with free courts and with free media. A state serving free citizens. The chapters are only important if they go together with these basics. The negotiations process is about building a state which functions in the EU legal machinery, but more importantly, which is recognized by the citizens of a European state. Every time we open a new chapter, we need to ask ourselves, are we getting closer to the ideal model, or we are just ticking a box? In the country, getting another few percent of preparedness to be this ideal member state of the Union, if we have doubts about it, we need to reflect about the basics. The same is true about the Joint Committee. It was established by the Association Agreement to provide the parliamentary dimension of the accession process. This means that we are getting here as members of parliaments representing citizens of our constituencies. Our voters entrusted us with power and put obligation on our shoulder to understand all what we find relevant about Serbia's future in the Union and about the future of the European Union. We do it not only for the sake of Serbia, but we do it for our voters as well, so that they can trust that Serbia is becoming a genuine member state, welcomed by the citizens of France, of Slovakia, of Denmark, and Estonia, and others. We are here to discuss about the future of the Union, which will be a home for Serbia. Our debates should include comfortable elements, but also sensitive issues. We need to be able to understand things, especially sorry, I'm not very skillful. Especially when we are confronted with different description of reality, differently seen by the authorities and differently by groups of citizens or independent experts. We need to confront diverging opinions and make judgments for ourselves and our voters. The European Parliament that we represent will vote about any future member, and we are responsible to give honest answers in the name of our citizens from towns and villages between Lisbon and Tallinn. There were important elections this year in Serbia, in 2014, in 2016. This year, and there will be important once in the spring. During this meeting, we would like to hear as much as possible about the electoral framework in which Serbian authorities are chosen. We want to understand what needs to be improved in the electoral system. We wish to be informed what is functioning fine. We need to confront allegations about the irregularities, and we wish to see what is being done to avoid these claims in the future. I strongly hope that it will not be only possible to discuss these topics of elections or of future of Kosovo or media freedom in a transparent manner, but also that future agenda of this committee would reflect the topics that each side of this committee wishes to discuss. Let me finish by saying that we need to understand that we are ahead of a wedding. And it is natural that each side wants to present itself as the most beautiful, smart, and handsome bride and groom. However, there needs to be also a good proportion of honesty and openness, otherwise our marriage could end up in frustration and quarrels. I hope that it will not be the case. Let's understand who we are. Let's try to improve and let's get married all before year 2025. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kukan. We start the working part of our committee. The agenda is proposed. You have the copy of the agenda, all of you. Secretariat circulated it. All members have the agenda. Does anybody of the committee members has any amendments to our draft agenda, please? Thank you, Mr. Orlich. Mr. Kukan, thank you. Dear friends, dear colleagues, I would, if the majority agrees, would suggest to add at least one more point to the agenda. Considering that until now, at least in the mandates which I served here and I participate in this committee, we always had several important points which are important because they're part of our Serbian integration process. These separate points made it possible for us MPs to discuss every topic separately. Maybe it wouldn't be convenient for me to propose 7 points, separate points, but I would propose 1 point because I think it's outstandingly important. This is the work of the National Assembly of Serbia, the situation in-house, in National Assembly of Serbia, and also human rights and freedoms in Serbia, if the majority of present committee members would accept this. Thank you.
On this issue, very shortly, with all due respect to what you proposed, I think that agenda, as it is proposed, as it is in front of you, allows us to discuss all the pertinent issues on our bilateral meeting. So I would prefer to keep agenda as it is. Thank you.
Zahvaljujem.
I thank Mr. Kukan. I thank on behalf of our delegation, our part of the committee. So our joint conclusion was that 1 point of the agenda would give us space enough, ample space, to discuss all the issues which are important for all the committee members, as Mr. Kukan described it in his opening statement. Open discussion, frank, based on arguments. This why the committee jointly proposed agenda in this form. Do we have any other proposals to amend agenda or change the agenda? If not, I believe you would agree it would be only fair to vote about what Mrs. Marjanovic says, this new proposal to amend. So, do European parliamentarians, MEPs, do you agree to include the new proposed point as Mrs. Marjanovic proposed? No? Thank you. I take note. The MEPs do not accept this proposal. Do the Serbian Assembly members are in favor of this proposal to include this additional point? 2. Anybody against it? 7 against. Thank you. I take note that we have not voted in favor of this proposed amendment. I then put back the draft agenda to you as it is defined by MEPs and the Bureau. Who from the MEPs is in favor of the agenda, draft agenda circulated to you? Thank you. Anybody against? Thank you. We take note that European delegation adopted the draft agenda. Serbian Assembly members, who's in favor? Thank you. Anybody against? No. Thank you. Thank you all. The agenda is adopted as proposed by the Secretariat. All issues relevant to the members of our joint parliamentary committee will be discussed under the heading 3, Article 3. State of play of the accession negotiations and EU-Serbia relations in the presence of representatives of the Serbian government, Presidency in Office of the Council, and the EU and European Commissions. We will have also technical points on the agenda. Point 4, adoption of recommendations. The secretariats would have circulate our draft declaration, joint declaration. The co-chairs agreed upon it. 2 secretariats agreed upon our draft declaration. Until 16:30, 100 hours today, you can submit amendments. All amendments will be circulated among the members when they're translated in both working languages. Once the amendments are submitted, on the point 4, we will discuss the amendments, which will happen tomorrow morning. I pass now to point 2. The secretariats have submitted the draft minutes of the last EU-Serbia SAPC meeting from Strasbourg. Do anybody has any amendments on the minutes, draft minutes? All right. Then I declare our draft minutes of the 6th meeting in Strasbourg adopted. Point 3 of our agenda. State of play of the association negotiations and EU-Serbia relations in the presence of the Serbian government and representatives of the EU and European Commission. Keynote speakers, Serbian Minister for European Integrations, Mrs. Jadranka Joksimovic, Estonian Ambassador to Serbia, Eric Scher, and EU Ambassador to Serbia, Sin Fabrizio, on behalf of the EU Commission. We also have rapporteurs from both delegations who will take the floor. Mrs. Fajon and Mrs. Kovac. Mr. Kovac and Mrs. Filipovski, Madam Marjanovic, Mrs. Belli, Mrs. Fajon again, because she wanted to take the floor independently, Mr. Jovanovic, Mrs. Markovic, Mrs. Hukmak, Mr. Đurić, Mr. Rističević, Mrs. Stojković, Mr. Kukan, Mr. Stojmirovic, Milorad Mijatovic, Mr. Bogovic, Mrs. Tomic, Mr. Deli, and Mrs. Ferrand, who will join us. He will join us personally in the discussion. All of them will take the floor personally. We are always open for additional comments if any members of the committee want to take part in the discussion as it unfolds. Now I will hand the floor over to Mrs. Jadranka Joksimovic, Serbian Minister for European Integrations. Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't say dear colleagues. We are colleagues because we work on European integrations, and we are all members of parliaments. Mr. Orlic, Mr. Kukan, of course, Ambassador Fabrizio, Ambassador Scher, all other respective members. I think it is a good moment. The year is coming to a close. Looking to the end of Estonian presidency, we should sum up the year. State of play of European integrations. We had ups and downs, but the process as a word is a key word to explain everything that the process as such carries with itself. Every process has uphills and downhill phases. Frustrations are part of it, enthusiasm sometimes too much enthusiasm, too much ambitions, but the process as such is leading towards a final goal which, as Mr. Kukan said, should be a state which runs better, more efficient state, and EU membership.
I'm not saying that we should only talk about reforms without regard for membership, because I don't see why we should embark on a process which is the meeting of two political wills, those of the candidate for membership, and on the other hand, the will of the European Union and all the member states, so that this meeting of two political wills should result in some tangible prospects for the future, a future which would actually lead to the candidate's membership of this union. In that sense, reforms are of the essence, but the process of European integrations does imply membership. So that this is I'd like to say that we should also support Jean-Claude Juncker's statement, which has actually marked the process, it seems to me, the process of association, in particular of Serbia. it should not be watered down or relativized, because this is a statement which has demonstrated the leadership capacity which still exists in the European Union and its readiness. I'm talking, of course, about Serbia, not about others. So it's a readiness for Serbia to be recognized as a part of the leadership capacity of the European Union, in its capacity of candidate, also in the future when we become members. We have talked about deadlines. We've talked about the 2025 as the best case scenario in this process, whereby Serbia and Montenegro, by which they could become members. But I feel that although earlier we had a practice of setting deadlines, which it turned out later were too ambitious, were not realistic enough, were perhaps demagogical or populist or opportunistic in terms of the political moment, I believe that in this stage of negotiations, after everything which has happened in the European Union and between the candidate countries and in the region of the Western Balkans, I believe that deadlines are indeed important and they do serve a function. Because if you embark on a process which has this transformational capacity and power, which actually leads a country in a specific direction, reforms, and in the final analysis, this is a political process that is without a doubt. You have to have a credible response on the other side in terms of where this process is leading and what you can expect at a given point in the future. If you are to observe deadlines as a candidate, I believe that you, in this partnership of the meeting of two political wills, you are in your rights as a candidate to also seek some more certain deadlines to be defined. This is something which is quite understandable, I believe, and it should contribute to elevating the enthusiasm and lending more impetus to reforms inside the country and to support by the citizens of the country, and also to preserve the credibility of the policy of enlargement of the European Union, which has been heralded by the words of the President, Mr. Juncker. So as Mr. Kukan has said, there has been a certain degree of disillusionment in terms of the number of open chapters, although I do wish to thank Ambassador Scher once again for his extremely fair presidency, that of Estonia. That is something which it was a very good and very fair job in terms of presidency. And up to the last moment, they actually kept open the possibility for the member countries to also approve the opening of a third chapter. But it does seem to me that after all the messages which we've heard from Madam Mogherini to the effect that Serbia has made extremely good progress, and after the words of the President of the Commission, Mr. Juncker, I do believe that it is rightly that we expected the opening of that third chapter to at least 3 chapters. The member states decided otherwise. Of course, this is not something that we will be too sad about, but I do believe that accelerating this process of opening chapters can only lend more impetus to the process of reforms. As a minister, and I suppose you as MPs who are well aware of the process of European integrations, sometimes wonder why is this kind of understanding exhibited when it comes to opening chapters, because opening chapters is the best monitoring mechanism, the best mechanism for controlling the pace of reforms. But we do understand in the European Union, in the member states, the political processes differ. The process itself is not immune to changes in international relations within the European Union, with its own transformations and within the member states themselves. So, as you know, we opened a total of 6 chapters during the Maltese and the Estonian presidency, 2 during the Estonian one, 4 during the Maltese one. This is not a bad score in principle. Of course, we expect that things can improve during the Bulgarian and Austrian presidency, who have actually announced that this is going to be a very important topic, that of enlargement, on the agenda. We can expect that we will have an additional impetus linked to the opening of chapters, of course, followed by adequate reforms in the country, and with the adequate positions taken by the European Union and by the member states. If we do embark on this process with trading with too much caution and not sufficient degree of trust in each other, that would be a synergy of caution in terms of our European integration, which I do not think is the true nature of the policy of enlargement, which will not be to the benefit of either the European Union or us as a member country. I believe that this synergy should be reflected in a strategy of communication, realistic, encouraging messages. When we talk about encouraging messages, it is very important for us to touch upon the subject of I believe that our MEP colleagues will also talk about this. We should focus on this reactivated or reasserted regional approach to enlargement, which I believe of late has dominated the debates in the European institutions among the member states. And it seems as if Juncker's message has brought about a sort of apprehension that because now Serbia and Montenegro have been marked as the leaders of the process currently, the others will be discouraged. But I do believe that you have a very good, very diligent collaborator in Serbia that you can actually count on. And it seems as if you were saying to this collaborator, you do this because you will do this well. And that runs the risk of the other collaborators actually slowing down in their efforts, so that this actually begs the question of the credibility of you as someone who's delegating this work to all the others in terms of assessing those who carry out these tasks. We believe that in the process of European integrations, we should some should not be underestimated and others overestimated. Those who are the leaders of this process right now, in terms of membership, are expected to be agile, to be energetic, to be those who will not be creating any problems, but rather addressing their problems and, if possible, also the problems of others. I do not think that this is the most fortunate of approaches. Of course, appreciating the need for the entire region to make headway. And if everybody progresses, we will cooperate all the more. But as regards the enlargement process, we believe that the criterion of individual assessments, even if it is to the detriment to Serbia, is the only valid criterion which actually makes for the credibility of the process. Along those lines, I do believe that in the year to come, and Bulgaria has announced the summit that will be held in Sofia during its presidency with the Western Balkans countries. So this is the customary designation. Countries of the Western Balkans, I believe that these are partners from the Western Balkans. I'm not quite sure that we can use this status neutral definition. I do hope that this approach to the effect, let us not discourage others, that in the meanwhile it might discourage those who are making the most headway. That would be the worst scenario. I do believe that our government Parliament and our citizens who wholeheartedly supported our march towards the European Union shall support the continuation of European integrations. I can speak on behalf of my own ministry and on behalf of the government of Serbia that we shall do our utmost to expedite this process, that we shall not falter on that path, that we shall not actually share our frustrations with the citizens. We shall try to retain a high level of support to explain on a number of fronts why this is the best and the most important path for Serbia, that towards the European Union in political, economic, geostrategic, security, if you will, sense, in terms of not only stabilization but in terms of progress. We are using too much the word stability and not enough the word development and progress. I'm quite glad that we have Mr. Bogovic and other MEPs here who keep telling us that regional development is what matters, overall development is what matters through the proper use of EU funds, the strengthening of local governments, the local institutions' capacities, the domestic agenda, local development. This is also inter alia the objective that we are also pursuing. And in our ministry, we have two departments for pre-accession funds and their use and for local and regional development. These are very important aspects which I wish to underline. Of course, stability is a precondition, but we have to use the word development. That is the key word for European integration. I will shortly finish. I apologize for being quite expansive. In this year, that of Bulgarian and Austrian presidency, we already now have 3 negotiating positions already fully prepared that were on the agenda at the end of this year for budget and financial. Chapter 33 positions, a very important one, which deals with the status of Serbia as the recipient of donations, aid and funds, so that you can prepare properly for withdrawing other funds once you are a member and to also contribute to the joint budget. Then we have Chapter 9, financial services, banking and insurance, generally speaking at this point, and of course Chapter 13, fisheries. These 3 positions are fully completed, fully prepared, and the negotiating team and all the line ministries involved in the negotiating teams are intensively working on a number of other chapters which are in different stages, so I'm not going to speak anything specific about that, but it goes without a doubt that another 3 or 4 negotiating positions will be fully prepared shortly. So we expect a faster pace of the evolution of these things. We have different factors contributing to our heightened visibility in terms of accession to the EU, and the focus is on the European path of Serbia, which is very constructive in my view. And of course, most of you hold that view, and I thank all of you. I'm here to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you, Madam Joksimovic. It is now the time for the tabling of amendments has elapsed. We have received the amendments of both delegations. I thank those who have tabled them. I invite the Secretariat to work on them. And now I give the floor to Mr. Sher, Estonian Ambassador to Serbia, to speak on this next item of the agenda.
Thank you very much, Honourable Co-Chairs Orlic and Kukan, Honourable Minister Joksimovic, Honourable Members, Ambassador Fabrizi, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Presidency of the European Union, it is my pleasure to once again address the EU-Serbia Stabilisation and Association Parliamentary Committee, this time on the occasion of the 7th meeting here in Belgrade. Let me start by thanking the Parliament and the Government of Serbia for hosting us here in Belgrade. As well, I'm very happy for the positive contributions of this committee to the EU enlargement process. As the Estonian presidency, we are committed to advance the enlargement process based on EU values and in full respect of the basic principles of conditionality and own merits. The most recent accession conference took place in Brussels last week and was chaired by my Foreign Minister, Sven Mikser. As a result, I'm happy to say that we were able to open 2 further chapters, namely Chapter 6, Company Law, and Chapter 30, External Relations. This result provides clear evidence that Serbia continues to advance in its accession negotiations and reflects Serbia's progress in meeting the requirements for membership. The positive momentum in the accession negotiations has been maintained. The pace of the accession negotiations will continue to depend on Serbia's progress and reform efforts, in particular under the rule of law chapters and in the normalization of relations with Kosovo. On the rule of law, the Commission delivered its latest assessment on the state of play regarding chapters 23 and 24 in November, which showed an overall mixed picture. Progress has been made, but it needs to be stepped up. In many areas, implementation remains at an early stage. In general, it remains important that Serbia meets in a timely manner the commitments taken in its action plans and that it moves forward on the interim benchmarks for these chapters. Serbia needs to intensify its efforts on judicial reform and the fight against corruption and organized crime. Regarding fundamental rights, the freedom of expression and media has to be ensured. Shortcomings in this area need to be addressed as a matter of high priority. In addition, we reiterate the importance of the protection of minorities and of the implementation of Serbia's dedicated action plan. Rule of law and fundamental rights, together with public administration reform and economic governance, remain the fundamentals of the accession process. We welcome the continued good progress on the economic reforms and look forward to further progress on public administration reforms. Let me also use this opportunity to address some other areas under the political criteria, such as foreign policy. As a country negotiating accession to the EU, Serbia is expected to further deepen cooperation with the EU in this area and to progressively align with the EU's foreign policy positions, including the restrictive measures and in line with the negotiating framework. At the same time, we recognize Serbia's strong role and participation in the CSDP missions. Regional cooperation and good neighborly relations continue to be essential elements of the enlargement process. We welcome Serbia's reiterated commitment to regional cooperation and its constructive engagement in a number of regional initiatives. Following the closure of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, full cooperation with the United Nations mechanism for international criminal tribunals remains essential. Regarding the normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo, we welcome the integration of the judicial personnel into the Kosovo judicial system in October. It remains important that all agreements reached within the dialogue are fully implemented by all parties. We envision that Serbia stays continuously engaged, including in the joint work on a new phase leading to the comprehensive normalization of relations. We also recognize the opening of a domestic dialogue on this issue. The Council will continue to support the EU-facilitated dialogue and to closely follow the progress. Since we are nearing the end of the year and the end of our presidency, allow me also to take a look ahead. Enlargement in the Western Balkans will be high on the EU agenda in the months to come, and I encourage you to seize this positive political opportunity to communicate domestically on the EU and to accelerate reform efforts. It is of particular importance in light of the upcoming country report and the subsequent stock-taking in the Council. In this regard, the participation and encouraging messages of your Prime Minister at the recent Stabilisation and Association Council are highly appreciated. We are pleased to see that enlargement will also be high on the agenda during the next presidency. There will be a number of milestones under the Bulgarian presidency. The Commission Western Balkan Strategy in February, the regular enlargement package in April, and the EU Western Balkan Summit in Sofia in May. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the government and the Parliament of Serbia and Minister Joksimovic for their support and cooperation during the Estonian presidency. Relations between the two countries have expanded during this period. Co-chairs, honourable members, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by welcoming the continued progress in Serbia's EU accession negotiations, but also by encouraging Serbia to accelerate its reform process and to pursue with determination its strategic objective of EU membership. As I've mentioned before, the place of the Western Balkans is in the European Union, and I think that Estonia is an example that this process is worth it. Thank you for your attention.
Zahvaljujem, gospodine Scher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now I give the floor to EU Ambassador to Serbia, Mr. Fabrizio, Head of Delegation, speaking here today on behalf of the European Commission to us. Mr. Fabrizio, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair, Minister, honorable members of the Serbian Parliament, of the European Parliament, colleague, my fellow Estonian colleague, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me here. This is my first time in this format, and is also giving me an occasion to a little bit, as those who have spoken before me, to look at the year which is about to end and a little bit of what is expecting ahead of us. I try to be short, as some of the points has been already covered. But let me start with the current, I would say, dynamism, momentum that we see into the relation between EU and Serbia. I think if you look at the past 12 months, the European Council in March have stated the unequivocal commitment towards the region integration, and President Juncker in State of the Union speech in September 17 has made a call for a credible enlargement of the European Union to Western Balkans. And I think the High Rep Mogherini, Commissioner Hahn has repeatedly expressed their commitment to work with the country, to work with the region in a spirit of mutual partnership. And only earlier this week there was a very important and very useful meeting between the High Rep and the Prime Minister of the region, including Serbia Prime Minister. So, as I said before, the 2018 we end up with this 17 and enter the 18 with good sign. I think we have to capitalize on this sign because there's a new dynamism there. As you know, the Commission will present a strategy for the Balkans, for the Western Balkans in February, which is come from mandated by what President Juncker said in September. In April there will be the regular progress report by the Commission. There will be a summit in May organized by the Presidency of the Council, which will be Bulgaria in the first semester. There will be the European Council in June. So we have a very important window of opportunity ahead of us, and I think it's the interest of both Serbia and the EU to seize this opportunity. That means that we need to accelerate the path of preparation of the negotiation, to have an increased cruising speed, and at the end of the day conducting reform that will bring Serbia into the European Union. I think there's a strong and collective need to make the requirement of Serbia to enter the European Union also more visible to the citizen, more communication, what the EU, Serbia in the EU, what will bring the benefits that will be inherited from this. A quick word on the negotiation. Most has been said last week. 2 new chapters. I think 2017 has been a good year also from that point of view. 6 chapters has been open in the past 11 months. So I think this is a good result, and Serbia has also advanced in the preparation for other chapters that will be open in the future. I state again what I said already in the past, that opening chapters is important. I give always a positive message, so that's why the opening of 2 new chapters should be considered as a positive, as a very positive step forward. But basically, the important is what is associated with chapters, reforms. And I think it's when you open a chapter, you are all at the beginning. What is important is to deliver reform and close the chapters. And of course, we always have to work on managing expectation on both sides. Serbia has its own expectation, probably some of the member states has a different expectation. At the end of the day, 2 chapters were open. And I say also managing expectation because, you know, in the negotiating framework, also the member state will look at the progress not only in the chapter in se, but also another 2 elements, which is the progress on the rule of law and the progress in the normalization in the relation with Pristina. And so I think this is we have to use also the political message emerged from the last IGC to increase, if possible, more the work on the rule of work, which important, it need to become a political and a world priority for the next steps. So a number of initiatives are there. I know that you know that the Commission is looking very closely to the next step. I think we had this interesting meeting this morning with the Prime Minister and Minister of Justice, who basically passed the message that in work in this area need to be done and will be done. I mentioned before, it's been mentioned the normalization with Pristina is another important element. I think Belgrade is constructively engaged in this exercise. We hope the progress will be made. And also we were always said that we welcome the internal dialogue that the President Vučić has launched. Is an important initiative to bring into the fold these very sensitive and important issues. Regional cooperation as well has been mentioned, and I think Serbia has made a number of good steps in making the regional cooperation and relation with neighbors better. And I think it's a number of visits, inbound, outbound, that we saw in the past months are testimony of this to create a new momentum, not only between the EU and Serbia, but the whole region in itself. The more the region talk each other, the more the process to Brussels will be easier. CFSP, or Common and Security and Foreign Policy, is an area of importance. Our position is clear. We all have welcomed the steps that Serbia has done in participating to some of our missions. I mean, even in difficult part of the world, like in Africa, Serbia is also thinking to open the Serbian participation to our mission, not only to military but also civilian. I think is another good step. The participation of Serbia to the battle group Herbrock, which is another good sign. But at the end of the day, the mandate of negotiation provides Serbia has to fully align with the European Union Common and Security Foreign Policy by the time of the accession. So in our case, always an encouragement to progress and to align progressively. Economic and structural reform, I think the progress has been made there. You know that we have an economic reform program, which is part of the accession between the EU and Serbia, which is progressively align Serbian priorities in the economy to what is the economic semester, so basically economic policy in the European Union. This is an important part of the work that we do every year, and I'm glad that Serbia is engaged in this exercise to complete and progress further the reform in the economic area, which is very important to deliver a modern economy, to deliver growth and migration. Maybe a mention to the migration. I see that we should recognize that Serbia has played an important role in how the migration flux has been affected the whole Europe, and Serbia as well. And Serbia right now is accommodating nearly 4,000 migrants. The structural measure has been put in place with the help of the European Union, and as we said in the recent past, the EU remained ready to support Serbia as necessary, because this is and migration is an issue that won't disappear overnight, required a lot of effort and a long vision. And the EU will continue to remain the largest, not only trade and investment partner of this country. 2/3 of the inbound investment, 2/3 of the trade of Serbia goes to the European Union, and we see as a positive sign that the progressive integration of Serbia into the value chain of the largest single market in the world, which is the European Union. But also EU remained the largest donor to Serbia. Our IPA funds, Minister Joksimovic is very much in charge of this. It's 200 million euro that the European Union gives to Serbia every year to help Serbia in the different areas of the accession. Some of these results are more visible. You see a bridge, you see a school, but most of them are invisible because are intangible, because it's training, it's capacity building, it's a long-term exercise, and we are putting all the seed to make those institutions able to enter the European Union and sustain the European Union in the future. Very last point. So basically, the Stabilisation Agreement Council, where Prime Minister attended in 16th of November, was a positive one. A number of good political messaging and commitment to do work more has been passed. So I would say I close this my remarks and looking at how close the 17 with a positive sense. The need of seeds really the momentum in 2018. It might be an irreputable and a unique opportunity there. The EU has laid down its own stepping stone, February, the strategy, the report progress, the summit and the European Council in June. So I encourage really Serbian to look at this in this way, and I wish this committee all the fruitful discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Zahvaljujem gospodine Fabricio, još jednom zahvaljujem se.
Thank you, Ambassador Fabrizi. Thank you, dear guests. Before we start giving floor to the members of the committee, I'm asking the committee members, do you want to ask or comment anything you've heard until now from the EU institutions or Serbian government? If anybody wants to speak immediately, please. Regarding the keynote speeches, introductory speeches, if we have no comments, thank you very much. Mr. Kukan, sorry, please.
Sorry to take the floor, but I think that we need kind of lively discussion. The thing I'm going to mention was mentioned by the previous speakers, and I want to emphasize it, how we, members of the European Parliament, dealing with Serbia, are feeling it. Both Estonian ambassador and Mr. Fabrizi mentioned that there is a golden window of opportunity to push forward the process of enlargement. And this is what I want to explain in a very simple language. I'm fully aware that when a politician raises the expectations too high, it's risky. And it's dangerous because provided they are not fulfilled, they backfire. But I wanted to inform you that in Brussels, all the European institutions, maybe it started with the State of the Union address of the Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker, but the mood, the atmosphere, the conditions for more progress in the enlargement process are very tangibly felt now. Incoming Bulgarian presidency does not hide its ambitions to push things forward. And I think that those ambitions are well founded, that they thoroughly prepared for the presidency. They created a special ministry for the enlargement process for the presidency. Madam Minister came to us to Brussels and we were discussing things with her. They have very well elaborated program, and of course, I would better wait, and I told them that we shall hold them by their words. But I believe that things should be used in order to push forward the enlargement process. It applies to Serbia, of course, but it applies to all the countries in the Western Balkans. The rhetorics in Brussels about the enlargement has changed. It's much more positive. And we are fully aware that if these nice rhetorics will not be followed by some concrete projects, then you are in a position to criticize us heavily. So we are really looking forward, and I simply want to encourage you to use also this opportunity, because after Bulgarian presidency, Austria is coming, and Austria is well known about the experience, historic experience with the countries of the Western Balkans, and I'm sure that they will be very effective presidency as well. So my appeal, and that's why I ask for the floor to you, is please help us, because we are ready and we will do our best to push the enlargement process forward. To do that, we need hard proofs from you which we can use in order to be much more positively engaged to this process. Thank you very much.
Hvala, gospodine Kukan.
Thank you, Mr. Kukan. Anybody else asking for the floor? Mr. Stanimirovic? Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I'm very glad to see all of you again, and that we are all focusing on a common objective, which is the accession of a certain number of countries from this region to the European Union. I'm not deliberately saying the Western Balkans, as shyly mentioned by colleague Minister Joksimovic. This is indeed a designation unknown in geography so far. I don't know how you came up with it. Our scientist Jovan Cvic defined this area well, and he never used the concept of the Western Balkans. If we proceed from what countries we have in the Western Peninsula: Turkey, Greece, Albania, Macedonia, Serbia, Croatia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Slovenia, 11 countries. Some are partly and some are completely in this area. And to be honest, if we remember what we learned in primary school in geography, who could be Western Balkans? Well, a part of Slovenia, a part of Croatia, could be Banja Luka and Kordon in Bosnia and Herzegovina, for a major part, and I see no reason whatsoever why you keep referring to Western Balkans. Slovenia and Croatia are already in the European Union, so you're only talking possibly about Bosnia and Herzegovina. On the other hand, I'm greatly pleased when I hear you talk about our accession to the European Union, when Mr. Kukan says that a powerful and fair union wants to embrace Serbia, etc., etc. And you keep reiterating that on your part everything is fair. You want to be truthful, honest, friendly in embracing Serbia. Whereas on the other hand, when we take a look, Serbia is doing everything possible to fill the bill, to meet the requirements. But these requirements keep coming anew all the time. So no matter how hard we try, it will be hard put to really accomplish all that. Does it really matter how many chapters have been opened? No. How many will be closed is what matters. I somehow have the impression that the majority of the countries of the European Union actually look upon Serbia, the Serbian people, as a small people, and that is a mistake. This is not a small people. This is a big people, a great people. I'll show you in the next couple of minutes why we are a great people and how we are a great people. Please take a look 100 years back, 1917. Or thereabouts. So imagine that all of us who are present here agreed to meet in Belgrade on that day, this same day in 1917. How much time would we be needing to travel to get there? How would we be traveling? What would be our communication means? How would we be talking today without microphones, without electricity, without mobile phones? And who is deserving for what we have today? One of the the biggest, most prominent scientists in world terms, Nikola Tesla, Serb, just one in a series of great noted men of the Serbian nations who have given not only Serbia but the world very much without asking anything in return. On that particular example, you will see how great the Serbian nation is and what a noble people they are. So accession to the EU will be more of a gain for the EU than for Serbia. So please, when you do help us, please make an effort that it is really in good faith, that it is honest, that it is sincere in a way which will best suit the European Union and us. Thank you. Madam Joksimovic, yes, let me say, the esteemed MP Stojmirovic, who has noted that I shyly refer to the Western Balkans. This was not my subject. This was not what I focused on today. Everybody who knows me know that I very vociferously and never shyly say that I'm not an advocate of the concept of Western Balkans. Perhaps I'm the only one in the government who does not speak about Western Balkans. And because Southeast Europe is the term which was introduced in 2003 and at the Thessaloniki summit, so Southeast Europe makes sense. It makes sense not only geographically speaking, but also in broader terms. And Serbia certainly belongs to it. As regards this definition, this designation of the Western Balkans, Mr. Kukan, as a very experienced European politician, knows this full well. Sometimes a phrase, an idiom, a sentence designation is introduced without any particular explanation, and it just becomes part of common usage, and all documents refer to it without any detailed rationale or explanation of the reasons. My question was always, where is the Eastern Balkans? Where is the Southern Balkans? Where is North Balkans, if we are talking about Balkans? The Balkans is, remember, Turkey. Greece is also a part of the Balkans. So are Bulgaria and Romania. Croatia and Slovenia, as of the moment they acceded to the EU, stopped being treated as countries belonging largely to the Balkan Peninsula. So the political connotation of this phrase, Western Balkans, is actually geared towards identifying those who are currently not in the European Union. And I personally feel, I'm talking about this region, of course, I'm not talking on behalf of the other countries in Europe which are not members of the EU. Therefore, I believe that indeed the designation Eastern Europe or southern parts of Eastern Europe, if we want to be strictly geographical, but of course in politics you don't always use or only use the geographical designation. So Eastern Europe is what I always advocated as a minister. But as I said, designation becomes customary without any particular explanation or debate, and it starts to be customarily used. And I do not agree with it, although I know that my position is perhaps not too popular, because to bunch together, politically speaking, all of those who are not members of the EU into an area designated the Western Balkans or the 6 of the Western Balkans, and then what we will have afterwards, the 4 or the 5 Western Balkan countries. So I believe that the European Union should actually go back to the designations which were sensical, which were used in the Thessaloniki summit when they talked about us as the Southeast Europe or Eastern Europe. Thank you, Madam Joksimovic. Does anyone else wish to take the floor before we thank our distinguished guests? We have 2 more speakers who wish to take the floor. Mr. Hochmark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Sometimes I feel that we are making these things a little bit too magic or mystical. Sometimes it's said that ambitions or requirements are changing all the time, or they're becoming higher and higher, and it seems like it's a sacrifice. I think, first of all, I have no doubts where I am. We can describe it southern, eastern, western, wherever, but as I understand it, I'm in Belgrade and in Serbia. And for us, in my perspective, it's important to have the opportunity to have Serbia as a member of the European Union, because it's good for the European Union, but it's good for Serbia and it's good for this region. And then you can describe it however we like. I think we are, all of us coming from big, small and decent nations, we are big Europeans. That's why we are here, in order to make a difference. But I just would like to underline one thing. Don't talk about the requirements as sacrifices. Because what it's all about is that we need to have the same rules, the same legislation all over the European Union. That's the requirement. And have a rule of law that's independent, to fight corruption, to lay the ground for prosperity by open economy, or contributing to the development of the region where you are as a good neighbor. That's not sacrifices. I would like to say, European Union or not, it's quite good to fight corruption. And it's quite good to secure that you have an independent judiciary. And it's quite good to do all the things that are required in the negotiations. And this is not a requirement just on Serbia. It was a requirement on Sweden when we did enter. It's a requirement on existing members. I mean, the European Commission has today warned Poland for not living up to some of the requirements regarding the rule of law. But no one is asking Serbia to do anything that is not good for Serbia. But we are requiring from each other to have the same standards, living up to the same rules of law, and to do the same fight against corruption. And I don't think the country of where Mr. Tesla comes from is less aiming for that as a country where Mr. Ericsson came from. I mean, I don't think we differ from that. So I think it's important in our ongoing discussions, don't describe the requirements and negotiations as sacrifices. It's a matter of fulfilling what is the common rule in a legal union, aiming for having the same opportunities, open borders, and a strength as a joint European Union. I just wanted to underline that, because sometimes I hear or sense that there are other beliefs in the discussions, but no one is requiring anything else that isn't required from everyone in the Union.
Hvala, gospođo Joksimović, izvolite.
Thank you, Mrs. Joksimovic, please.
Because of the efficiency of the whole process, not okay. So, dear MEP, I would like, first of all, to explain that maybe your impression that we talk about reform process and about negotiation process and requirements from the Copenhagen criteria as a sacrificing process, I'm sure that that's only your perception, because I want to underline that, for example, at least 3 circles of elections previously, this government and this party, leading party, never said that those unpopular and very difficult reforms, especially economic one, but also the reforms, overall reforms in the area of rule of law, hasn't been let's say, introduced or started because of the pressure from Brussels. Never. We said that is something that we need to do to stabilize our, let's say, macroeconomic area, to stabilize our public finances, to make our country more efficient, to reform judiciary system, judicial system, etc., etc., struggle against corruption, etc. So I can assure you that never Brussels, in public statements, in even election campaigns, never was, let's say, targeted as a prime reason why we are fulfilling all these requirements, why we are in the EU integration process, why we need fiscal consolidation measures, why we need IMF precaution arrangement, etc., etc. So I think that your remark is very important, and I really agree with you, and that is something that we understand and that we have learned from previous experiences from some other candidate countries now being member states, that if you start to blame Brussels and to play this blame game, then it is a lose-lose situation. And I can assure you that we will not certainly use this argument as some kind of pretext for all these reforms that our society really needs. Thank you.
Zahvaljujem i posljednja prijava za pitanje.
Well, I thank Mrs. Joksimovic. Mr. Weitz, our last speaker.
Ambassadors, Minister, fellow colleagues, first of all, I'm very glad to be back to Beograd, the capital city in the region. And I'm also very proud to be part of the process that aims to overcome all kinds of historical conflict lines. I think this is an aim that we all share. First of all, I am very much supportive of the regatta principle, as we call it. So every country should access the European Union in the moment that it is ready to do so, and that it has, when it has implemented the acquis communautaire and the principles that we all share in Europe. So I think this should not be linked to the Western Balkans or the Southeast European region, or call it whatever you like, but it should be seen country by country. Another statement also to the accession date. I think that the progress of further integration into the European family as such has brought and is bringing progress to a country like Serbia, or to Serbia as such already. I think there's a positive progress in the economy development. There's a positive progress in exports to the European Union. There's a positive progress in investments coming into the country. There's also financial support, and this is also creating progress in the country, for the country as such. And I think also a stronger and more democratic society is something that is a profit for the country as such. So if the accession date is a year earlier or a year later, I think we shouldn't stick to a certain exact date. The progress in coming closer to the European family as such is a big, big value. And I hope that we are perceived here coming from the European Union as being friends and as acting as friends, not just speaking as friends, but also acting in practical way in reaching out and stretching out our hand to a friendly and eye-level communication and eye-level negotiation. So I hope this is not perceived in another way. Maybe just to make one point on the question of media. As we perceive it, what I do not understand completely is how it comes that very often official politicians from the government, but also members of the parliament, when they speak publicly about the friends of Serbia and the states supporting Serbia, I miss sometimes more positive statements towards the European Union. I think the way we act would allow sometimes more positive statements, and I would really welcome that. And just some words to media in general. As I perceive it, media is the third pillar of democracy, and I've heard complaints or analysis also that for minority point of views, or also for opposition point of views, it is really getting hard to be heard in Serbia. And I would urge you also towards the government, but also towards the parliament, to support quality media and to support the quality journalism, which is there in Serbia. Because if there's not enough support for quality media, what chances does an opposition then have to be heard? If I want to be heard and it's hard to be heard, I have to become very populistic. I have to phrase my words in a really harsh way to kind of reach the attention of the population. And I think this is not contributing to the democratic process as such. So I would really would welcome it if you could strengthen your efforts to support quality journalism in Serbia.
Hvala gospodine Vajc.
Thank you, Mr. Weitz. I'm quite sure that in the conclusions from the previous SAPC meetings, you could see that we always had a joint position towards that question and called upon everybody to heighten the quality and professionally treat the media question. And Madam Joksimovic, first of all, I should like to remind you, as far as I know, although I did not attend this event, that Mr. Bogovic and some of the other MEPs organized a debate recently in the European Parliament analyzing the way and whether the jeopardy to the media freedom is a perception or reality. And I believe that we shall agree that this is a perception. I don't know for what reason this perception is created. Perhaps we were not active enough in presenting all the activities that we as a country, candidate country, have undertaken within the legislative framework, first and foremost in the set of media laws that have been adopted, which of course need to be implemented in practice, and that requires some time until they are fully implemented. And we also prepared a new media strategy in a very active, inclusive, and participatory way in cooperation with media associations. Some of them did not want to participate, but this is a process which is open to all in terms of consultations. Therefore, I do believe that those were the conclusions that you also brought in the debate at the European Parliament. It is a very polarized media picture, but what is lacking, and which I believe is a problem in the majority of the member states of the EU, is the lack of perhaps sufficiently professional and responsible journalism. So professionalism and perhaps this tabloidization, the race for increasing circulation and the competition with digital media, which actually compete with the classical printed media, so that we have a situation that we have a strict requirement for the state to withdraw from the media on the one hand. On the other hand, we have to make a whole series of exceptions when it comes to national minority languages media or the media of some other groups which cannot compete on the market, so that we as the state have to support them, to help them to survive. I'm talking about some local media and, conditionally speaking, minority media. So if we were to strictly observe the rules which apply to all media, market rules in other words, believe me, a lot of the media would not manage to survive on the media scene in Serbia. But I do agree, I absolutely agree, we seek to achieve the standards required and to regulate not only the media space but the media content, financing, advertising, better regulation of overall media segment, and of course the transparent financing of the media, which I believe is of utmost importance. So we are not shunning criticism, we are not evading criticism, but you should know that these processes, which were erroneously actually set to begin with, cannot change overnight, but there is a pluralism of opinions, there is a debate atmosphere, there is a diversity of media, but media professionalism is something that we have to work on as a society. Thank you, Mr. Đurić and Madam Fajon afterwards. Mr. Đurić, this is very likable, this picture as perceived of the media situation in Serbia. I have a totally different view. The independent associations, the Independent Association of Journalists of Vojvodina, has actually withdrawn from this dialogue, just as the professional associations of judges and prosecutors have led the debate in regard of Chapter 23. I would like to hear the comments of our guests. What is this situation like? We have a partially suspended work of Parliament prior to presidential elections. What is this? This amounts to a coup d'etat. The explanation which was given is the atmosphere in society will be heated up, so Parliament cannot work in this period, only because there are MPs who are also presidential candidates, it so happens. So the highest piece of legislation was completely suspended in this way, and during the 2 months during which we were to have the regular spring session of Parliament, this body did not work. In this way, this society was deprived of a serious segment of public debate. To say nothing about any TV confrontations between presidential candidates. There were none on TV. So we can no longer talk about the situation in the media and seek excuses of the way in terms of we cannot do this overnight. We have Verica Barac's report, the late Verica Barac. Nothing has changed since her report. Everything is being done since then, but there is a lack of style and there is a high degree of revengefulness on the part of the institutions here. So controlling financial flows so as to keep the media under control, all these known mechanisms of influence are still actually active. So it is not about changing something overnight. For 5 years, 5 years has been quite enough for changes to be made. So I'm asking about sincerity. It is very likable when our European partners come and say, yes, Serbia is making much progress. Yes, it is. For me, as a representative of the opposition, the Ministry of European Integration should be a ministry that we have no problem at all with, and we do not have any problem when it comes to technical details. But when it comes to political, we do have problems in terms of sincere reforms within Chapter 23. And something which is not resulting in a non-paper with words such as delays, serious delays, great postponements, and very little has been done. So, as a representative of the opposition, I have to raise the question of the sincerity of this government, or is it that this government is also using the judiciary as a lever by which the government and their representatives will be held above the law? All this aside, can we ask for specific deadlines from our European partners? I'm deeply convinced that except for the general blanket statements that we now have a much more positive atmosphere in Brussels in terms of enlargement, this is the maximum that we shall get. The rest is upon us. So if we are not ready to do everything that is upon us, the historical blame will be on us, and we will not be able to meet any deadline. We shall again have a resulting non-paper which will say little has been done, no results achieved, etc. Thank you. I will have more to say later. Well, Mr. Distinguished MP, first of all, this part in which you're explaining that because you're opposition, you're a priori against the argumentation which is presented by anyone from the government or the ruling majority, speaks about your seriousness in approaching this process. So the role of the opposition is to bring arguments to bear, to support, not the government. It is your thing to fight against the government, okay, but to support what contributes to the reform process in Serbia. If you're a pro-European opposition, we are a pro-European government. So we should have a meeting of minds, at least in regard of political will for European integrations. As regards the media associations that you refer to, I said this a number of times. This is the same formula of behavior, politicized, like you have just now shown, because if you are not a follower of a specific policy of a specific government, or it doesn't really matter, you a priori have to be against something, which is an open participatory process. The media associations were called upon, invited to participate on an equal footing with everybody, to present their arguments, to present their ideas, their ways, how they think we should promote, regulate the transparency, the financing of the media strategy, the position, the function, and the status of the journalistic profession, which is very important, exceptionally important. But a part of these associations, a number of them decided to opt out of this process, not to participate. I believe that the Prime Minister and other ministers also in the government specifically they actually received for special talks and exchange of arguments some specific media associations, but I believe they should talk with everybody, because I don't see what criteria should define who is relevant and who is not relevant. If they are the media, they are all equal, and we should talk to all of them equally. So I think that your criticism is not founded. Also, when it comes to Chapter 23 and the delays, yes, the action plans were adopted a number of years ago. It is possible that we were overly ambitious in terms of meeting certain deadlines, but you should also know that the national plan for the adoption of the acquis, which is our national reference document whereby we regulate our obligations, we revised it twice, observing that we were delayed and late in specific areas. So we have now also revised the action plan for chapters primarily 23, although also in 24 there are some things which need to be revised, so that in the course of this year we shall align the new deadlines and the new steps to be taken from 2018, the end of 2018. We shall move it to the end of 2021. And I believe that this is quite realistic, because we are also observing the messages coming from the European Union. Do not forget that 2025, which is potentially designated as the year of our potential membership, that should mean that by 2023 we would have to have opened and closed all the chapters in order to be ready for the further process in terms of preparing documents, ratification in the member states, etc., and everything which is involved in this process. As regards the Ministry for European Integrations, we, as the Ministry, are the chief coordinator of the overall negotiating process. The line ministries are all working on their particular segments of Chapter 23, the Ministry of Justice, as well as all the other involved ministries. Just the preparation for action plans for Chapter 23 and of some measures which were taken, it took the participation of over 60 different institutions. So this is a broad spectrum of institutional competences which need to be coordinated. So it is not at all easy. So because of that, there have been some postponements, some delays, we agree, and that is why the revisions are taking place. But I do feel that the civil society, opposition parties, mind you, there are pro-European and anti-European opposition parties. All this is opposition in Serbia. We cannot ignore those who are not in favor of the European Union or those who are. So we communicate with everybody, all of them. We submit to them materials. We inform them of everything being done in the ministry. I have answered a multitude of documents, and so have my associates coming from these parties. So the door is open to you along those lines, mind you. Madam Fajon, and after that we have three speakers who wish to speak: Mijatovic, Marjanovic, Shormaz, and Rističević.
Local language might not be that good to understand me. A lot of things have been said, and I would like to express also myself some points and maybe also some questions. First of all, let me start by saying that I follow the European enlargement for the last 15 years, and I'm a big supporter of the enlargement to the Western Balkan. And it has changed a lot in the last 15 years. Each next enlargement, it's becoming more difficult for different reasons. And it also requires maybe different conditions and challenges. We saw that after Bulgaria, Romania, we see it now with the Western Balkan. We can discuss what are the challenges. I, as my colleague, would support the regatta approach, meaning the country that is ready should enter. And we have different views in Brussels on that. Some would prefer to see the package. I wish to see, but I know it's not realistic. Coming on media, we will discuss judiciary. I see it's very general debate, but just one remark on media. We had today discussion again with some of NGOs, and they said especially that professional and independent media, or all those who think different, are today really living in a very hostile environment. That this environment that is still healthy is shrinking for them in Serbia. I have to say that I also hear a lot of similar comments from people that come to Brussels, be it NGOs, be also people from the society, that feel some sort of anger towards, I would say, Brussels politics, also towards Belgrade politics. Now, what is to me interesting to observe is if you ask Serbian citizens, and we know that from all this region, a lot of young people are leaving for better opportunities elsewhere. So we have a brain drain in the region, which is concerning also from Serbia. But when you ask Serbians, young, they would like to go to Western Europe. They see better opportunities there. They see good European values and standards, maybe better conditions to study or to have jobs. But so it means that they somehow honor and have confidence to kind of European values. But when you ask them today in Serbia, do you have confidence in European integration? A lot of people would say no. So the question maybe for you would be how, as a government, you can communicate the process itself, not the end goal, but the process, to be tangible for people to understand it. Why these reforms that some see as a mean part of the path are really important. Maybe when you see it in judiciary or fight against corruption, that it can create healthy economic environment to attract foreign investments, to open jobs, how to make the process that it's very tangible for citizens. Only discussing opening and closing the chapters, people don't understand anymore. Can you communicate in a way that EU is gaining the leverage and not losing it? We all know that we have significant EU funds in the region, but somehow we prevail in the discussion with Russians, with Chinese, with, I don't know, Middle East, Turkey. It's a playground for different geopolitical interests, and EU is losing its leverage. I think this is the responsibility of all of us, politicians, how we communicate the processes as such. And I think we have a great opportunity to improve it also here in Serbia. This would be just maybe my reflection before we go into the details. Maybe another comment, because I know that that was more the comment for our colleagues parliamentarians. I know that the budget was recently passed in this House. What is concerning to me is to see that 10 hours debate is in a way hijacked by a ruling coalition. There is no space for the opposition to debate the amendments. And this is something that is concerning even to understand that the NGOs that are doing serious jobs are then, I don't know, blocking the open internet website because they feel that the parliament or the majority of the political parties are more taking care of their own interests, but not of citizens' interests. But maybe some of my colleagues can comment on that. Thank you.
Zahvaljujem, poštovana gospođo.
Thank you, Mrs. Fajon. I would give you two comments regarding the importance of bringing the process of European integrations to Serbian citizens. You mentioned pre-accession funds, the fact that European Union is the greatest donor in Serbia. Germany is the greatest bilateral donor in Serbia, 1.6 billion euros in past 16 years. European Union, if we take everything on board, 2.3, depending when you start counting from year 2000 or 2007, since we started using pre-accession funds. I will tell you that when I took office as Minister for European Integration, I became the national IPA coordinator of the pre-accession fund. So I realized with horror that we used the funds from 2007, but less than 10% people knew about the pre-accession funds. And I think this is my success and the success of this government. Latest survey shows us that the greatest number of people, 23% of people, does recognize EU as the greatest donor, and then, as you said, Russian Federation. Russians were for the long time being perceived as the greatest donor, although it was not the fact, and we have this change of tendency. People recognize this change of situation. EU is the greatest donor, major donor, and we have the pre-accession funds and projects here. So in the ministry, my ministry, 4 sectors are dealing with local, regional development, cross-border cooperation, European macro strategy, Adriatic and Danube pre-accession funds, cooperation coordination. So we are presenting EU integrations as part of our home development agenda, economic agenda. That's why we have our Ministry for European Integrations. We are not part of the Foreign Ministry. My idea was not to have together the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and European integrations, but to have European integrations as part of the domestic policy, and an important part which will have an important role to play to bring closer to the citizens European integrations, not just as a political objective. At this moment, European integrations have this sort of local, regional instrument, funds and so on, preparing state for tomorrow to have access to structural cohesion funds. I agree that we need this synergy in sending messages about the importance of the European way and the fact that the European Union was the biggest donor. You mentioned the young people leaving Serbia. This is the tendency that existed before. I do not think it is bigger than it was. But there is a figure that we got from the Chamber of Commerce here in Serbia. The largest number of seasonal workers in Serbia are still coming from Romania, and Romania is a member state. I think it is an important figure for you as a member of European Parliament and important for European Union. And I do not think these are encouraging figures for our citizens or as demonstrations of their enthusiasm. When we become EU member state, that's why the reform process is important. Economic criteria and indicators are important. We have to be a stable, sustainable state which is not just benefiting from the EU funds. And that's the message. As we were constructed at the time of migration crisis, and we want to contribute, and we want our citizens not to be motivated just to leave Serbia. We want development policy to be implemented in our country.
Thank you. Madam Fayon, as regards the practice of the National Assembly, that part of your comment, the rules of procedure actually apply to all MPs equally, irrespective of to which group they belong to, the majority or the minority. So that is how it is used. So we had debates in detail which lasted up to the time limit for the debate on the amendments. There were a number of situations, and during one debate there were more amendments of the parliamentary majority. On other occasions, more amendments of the parliamentary opposition were discussed. So there were more amendments tabled by representatives of the opposition in comparison to those tabled by the majority. I believe this is important to say. Mr. Mijatovic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask for the floor because of two things. First of all, both here and in Brussels, I heard one word. The ruling majority is not sincere when it comes to the European Union. In Brussels, I refuted this by arguments. Mr. Kukan was there. And I'm saying the same thing here. Serbia is substantially interested in acceding to the European Union. Everything that we do, everything that we undertake, we do so as to become a member of the European Union. This is in evidence in all the steps, not easy steps that we have undertaken. A financial consolidation from being largely in the red in terms of our fiscal deficit. We have now chalked up a surplus in our budget at the expense of salaries and pensions. When we did this, we were aware that without a regulated financial segment, without a regulated economy, we cannot be a member of the EU. We have achieved those results. We have presented those results, and we presented them during the adoption of the 2018 budget. In addition to that, we are finishing our motorways, railways, opening medical centers, and we are doing so in order to be a part of the EU, but only for our own sakes. Actually, all the reforms are being undertaken so as to make Serbia a better and more regulated country. Now, whether the speed is sufficient, this is something that you can also assess. This is our fifth or sixth meeting and talk. When you come to Belgrade, you can see for yourselves what changes have taken place in Belgrade. Apart from that, in our negotiations with Pristina, we had to take many difficult steps, undertake many painful measures. We did that, no matter how difficult it was. That is also a reflection of our desire to become a member of the EU. Therefore, it strikes one as unnatural for me to actually advocate something which are European values, and I'm not honest, I'm not sincere, but I am sincere because I want to be a part of the European Union. And as a very serious ruling majority, it is not all too easily that we promise to people when we will become members. We are aware of the fact that 2025, stressed by Mr. Juncker as a possibility for our accession to the EU. This is something which remains to be seen, but I do know what we want, and it is the essentially in the interest of Serbia to be a member of the EU. In the Parliament of Serbia, we speak about the EU in positive terms, positive connotations. I'm one of the MPs who avails himself of every opportunity to stress this and that we should undertake steps to change and that we should continue to do that. So it is not with negative connotations that Serbia is talked about in the public, in the EU. Of course, there are some political groups here also who are not in favor of the European Union, but what does surprise me is that those who are in favor of the European Union are actually negating the achieved results. Of course, we wanted to have 16 or 17 chapters open by the end of this year, but we managed to open 12. Next year, 2018, as you yourself underline, as the year which will be very important, is the year in which we shall do a lot together, I think. So I encourage you, Mr. Kukan, I encourage you to continue to be as combative as you are. I know how much you defend Serbia in the European Parliament. I know that you have like-minded MEPs who will do everything possible for us to transact this job as soon as possible. But for us, 2025 is actually too near, considering everything that we have to do. Thank you, Mr. Marjanovic. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Orlic. Actually, in keeping with what Mr. Kukan has said, and I like that in his keynote address, to the effect of us being about to get married, and that in this it was in our joint interest to do everything possible and to fulfill the obligations of both parties so that this future marriage should be as successful as possible. As for the opposition that we are part of today, especially regarding, given the circumstances that I talked about at our earlier meetings, where we have a very strange substitution of roles, where the opposition is much more criticized by the ruling segment rather than vice versa. Actually, the opposition should be criticizing much more the government. That is its role. Given that, let me also add that I not for a single moment saw that anyone from the opposition, at least among those who are advocating our accession to the EU, and I mind you belong to a party which was the first to advocate the accession to the EU in Serbia, so that Mr. Kukan and many other MEPs, friends of Serbia, sincerely supported Serbia on this path, and the sincerity remains the same and has been confirmed because it is steadfast when we had this government and we have this other governments. So we owe you our gratitude for that. But what has been happening over the past several years and has been already referred to in previous speeches is the dramatic decline of the support by citizens of Serbia to this path. In past years, it used to be nearly 70%. Now it is under 50%. So I'm pleased to hear this figure, which was referred to by Minister Joksimovic, that the percentage of people who now have been informed about the fact that the European Union is the major investor in Serbia, although This morning, a delegation of secondary school students told me that they thought, whom I met this morning, thought that the most funds came from Russia, financial funds. But so they still haven't received this information that you refer to. What I would like to underline, and I have said this already, and the lady minister has already said this, this is not just a technical or reform process, this process of accession. This is a process of a change of a culture, of a political culture, the process of embracing specific values. We haven't talked enough about this in recent years, and that is why now coming to the fore are questions regarding the rule of law, the freedom of the media, etc. It is our duty as MPs. The government is doing its work, the technical part of the work, but it is our duty as MPs to help the citizens embrace these values. This is our first and foremost task. We don't have to deal with the technical questions, which is primarily the task of the government, as I've already mentioned. At this juncture, our citizens actually feel no improvement, any improvement as resulting from this process that we are going through, not only in terms of their lives being changed. What we have to do is to convince them that their personal lives will be better improved through this process. The descendants of Nikola Tesla have already gone to the European Union or to America or preparing to leave. So this is a fact that we as MPs have to take on board. These are indisputable facts and these are worrisome facts. As regards Parliament, at all sessions that we have had so far, both in Strasbourg and Belgrade, I talked about this, and once I proposed that here and now, together with our colleagues, MEPs and MPs, we should talk about the role of Parliament, the problems that the political minority and the opposition are confronted with in their everyday work. Why? Not only in order to defend the threatened members, the jeopardized members of the opposition, but because if Parliament does not function in a parliamentary way, in a democratic way, all other problems arise. Parliament elects judiciary bodies, the holders of judicial office, etc. And this is something that we have in evidence. This last session that was the shortest one, the shortest possible time was allotted not only for the session and for the budget, which in itself requires an enormous length of time. It was so short to cover another 30 very important pieces of legislation or items on the agenda. Of course, opposition MPs can table amendments, but clearly amendments were tabled this time in order to waste the time, to use up the time, so that the opposition would have no time to explain their amendments. And that is something which actually characterized this. And actually this is attested to by the fact that the governing parties, MPs, actually withdrew their amendments. As regards the media, when we adopted a package of media laws, which the minister is rightly emphasizing as a step forward, we insisted on the market segment of the application of this law. The media are not just a market thing. If you want to undertake a profound analysis, we actually do not have a media market, economically speaking. Today, a printed medium cannot survive without major advertisers or donations or subsidies or what have you from the state budget. This meeting was referred to with distinguished colleague Bogovic in the European Parliament, which did discuss which did elicit negative comment in part of the professional public. I do believe, Mr. Bogovic, that our friends in the European Parliament had the best of intentions. Perhaps it is because the Tanjug agency reported on this meeting, and that agency should have been already extinguished according to the already adopted laws because it had not been privatized in keeping with those laws, and this is not in keeping with market rules. It is still there. Nobody knows on what legal basis. It actually sends in its reports mainly on the work of the government of the Republic of Serbia, by the way. What we often hear when our colleagues from the ruling majority speak is that journalists are not professional, that is the tabloid journalism type. We can to a certain extent agree to that assessment, but it would be erroneous to draw the conclusion that the journalists are to blame for the situation in which the media is today, especially if we take into consideration the fact that today the greatest support, political and financial, open political support, is given to precisely the tabloids and those which are critically right to speak about the government, which is their obligation towards the citizens and the public, have been extinguished or are slandered or marginalized, criticized, or removed from the media scene in whatever way possible. So it is best for them to talk about this. I do not wish to be their advocate here, to be the mouthpiece, but since this meeting was mentioned with the government representative, this was a meeting before cameras. The minister promised that she would answer the questions posed to her by journalists in 2 weeks, which she didn't do. Unless we take into account a statement by her that she thought that it was problematic, that journalists should be investigating the property of politicians. Of course, they should be investigating the property of politicians. This is their job. Sorry. I do apologize. I'm finishing. My colleagues from the majority are warning me that they should also like to say something. But we are only 2 from the opposition, so don't worry. It will soon be your turn. I'll be finishing shortly. I wish to say with all the frustrations which of course exist on this path, I do believe that it is in the interest of us all to join the European Union in the shortest time possible. The opposition shall absolutely support all these efforts and the efforts of the government of the Republic of Serbia as it has done so far. But this does not mean that we should be totally excluded or totally silent in respect of processes taking place within Serbia, which are quite contrary to the values of the European Union, human rights, democracy, and protection of human rights. I think it is better for the government of the Republic of Serbia to have a common language, a meeting of minds with the opposition. They are capable of doing that so that as a society, in a peaceful way, with the full support of our citizens, we could join the EU. Thank you.
Mrs. Joksimovic. 2 topics only. I don't want to talk for too long, but it means a lot to me that you have mentioned high school pupils, students. If you have attentions enough, I would like to read you what we have supported as a ministry in 2017. Kruševac, Bruševac, Varvarin, so region of Vlašinac, topics, European Union, education, high school and students in Niš, educate yourself with European Union, broaden your views, then the association Youth Young Ambassadors, why are we negotiating EU membership, Niš, Novi Pazar, Brzeće, Kopaonik. Then the network of development initiatives, Young for Young, promoting European values at schools, European Union and national and cultural identities in Novi Sad and Jagodina. What do we know? What do we think we know about the EU? Facts and prejudices. EU national cultural identities in Belgrade, first Lycée of Belgrade, second, third, several adult school, fifth Lycée, and the youth theatre Dadov, and then the group Let's. European Union and national identities in Belgrade. So it is important for you to see that we are promoting the idea and the process of enlargement with young people, secondary school, separately, students separately. And I want to say, because we have MEPs here, for the first time our ministry had the stand at the book fair in Belgrade, and we had booklets about myths and illusions, preconceptions about union, advantages of the accession. Every chapter we explain, so if this is not visible, then I believe it will be even more visible. And I think we're working on it. Support, you said more than 60. So in 2009, when we got free visa regimes, it was 68%. And support is biggest. It shows us when we have tangible results. Every sounding of the public opinion, whenever we open a chapter or two chapters or more than two, which never happened till now, whenever we have a result, then there is increase of support for European Serbian integrations. So it is a role for all of us, media, MPs, government. We are negotiating the process. This is not a technocratic, but there are procedures that need to be respected. It's a free will process, a contractual process that brings obligations, but it has to be recognized. And we have to fulfill the criteria in this respect. Thank you. Talk for our discussion time. I remind the members that we have till 6:30 today. We have 25 minutes for our debate today. We have 4 speakers. And we haven't opened the next point, all the speakers before the next point. Mr. Shormas, thank you. I was preparing myself to talk about what Serbia is doing, defense, foreign policy, and so on. I'm sorry that our discussion went in this way. Maybe it's the fault of us as hosts, because we have often such meetings and we're not talking in this way, so some things happen. But let's do it today, and then we can deal with the topics which brought us together. I want to say to our guests, if you look up to the ceiling of this room, you'll see what Western Balkan is, or Southeastern Europe. I agree with Mr. Weitz. What is most important, this was a big parliament house, big nation, big state, several nations. Today is the 20th of December. I was first elected as an MP on the 21st of December, the year 2001. So this is my 2000, sorry, this is my 17th year in the parliament. I'll start my 18th year in the parliament next year in this house. So I have the longest standing here of all the colleagues present, I mean, with all due respect. And I spent half of my years here as opposition, half of my years I was majority, as I'm now the government majority. Government of Mrs. Barnabić and President Vučić. All this time, opposition in Serbia, and I was part of this opposition, is always complaining about the media, and they're never happy about the media situation in Serbia. Opposition is never happy with the opposition. Maybe I'm not the happiest now, but I think it was much better than what it was 5 or 6 years ago. Mr. Tadić was the president a few years ago. Now all his parties, there are 5 or 6 parties that emerged from his erstwhile party. In his mandate, you couldn't open your fridge without him jumping out at you, let alone from television. My colleague from the opposition is agreeing. So, this changed considerably. This is my impression. We can debate about it, but when we talk about electoral campaign, it is important for me to say for presidential election, and you say there are no television duel. I want to defend the institution of the assembly. So we heard the assembly didn't sit. No, we didn't have plenaries, but the committees were fully working. You know what political campaign is, and nobody said the parliament was suspended. No TV duels. There were about 20, 15, 16, 17 candidates. You are coming from such systems. In France, you had first TV duel when 12 candidates were sitting together, and it was a charade on television. But you could have television duel if we had 2 rounds. We didn't have the second round. Mr. Vučić won in the first round by popular will of our people. Gentlemen from opposition might like it or not, but this is the fact. About the amendments from the first day, and I'm very sad because of that. The opposition in Serbia doesn't have an answer. The opposition in Serbia is not an alternative. The opposition in Serbia is obstructing the parliament from the day one. They've submitted 1,700 on the amendments to budget. What type of amendments? Remove, remove, remove. So no concrete proposals. After the general debate, they want item by item to remove the law that they're against. Why are you going article by article? You do not have alternative. You are not offering alternative. So this is the obstruction, not a serious parliamentary work. Sadly, this is it. We are trying to convince them to work in a different way. If they were tabled 50 or 100 sensible amendments, certainly this would be part of a nice, considerate discussion. So they've led Parliament to a blockade and debates. Young people are leaving the country, our friend says, colleague says. Of course, that's why we want to go to the European Union as fast as possible. We have a lot since the feasibility study, regional reconciliation and so on. But 3 years ago we had an attempted attentate in Mr. Vučić in Bosnia, nothing resulted from it. We've sent to The Hague whoever was wanted, so this is all which is not the regular road to European Union, opening, closing chapters. Issues of Kosovo, Brussels agreements. So Serbia has many more obstacles than any other EU candidate state, and we have passed all of that. And I'm asking you now, in the past 3 months I visited both Bucharest and Sofia. If somebody tells me that Romania and Bulgaria today are ready, more ready than Serbia is at this very moment to join Serbia, and they were declared ready in 2007, well, I doubt that. So this is just the yardsticks, the measuring tapes that we are talking about. We just ask from you to support us on this way and to support our achievements. If we do something wrong, give us advice. But when Serbia is moving safely and stably to the European Union and will have 70% of popular support, when people will know that this road is certain and that we have real partnership and that we wish sincerely it and that everybody in Serbia understands that European Union wants Serbia. Thank you, Mr. Šormaz. Mr. Kukan now.
Thank you very much. I would also like to contribute to this interesting discussion. Sometimes it's good to open the door so all the emotions get out. You feel better. The remark by Mr. Đurić prompted me to answer, but my remark applies both to government and the opposition. I have difficulty in explaining it in English, but it seems to me that in the political air, in the political atmosphere of Serbia, there is one strange element. The element that you have kind of tendency to feel pity for yourself. And it's your feeling. You know, you said that you need the date for accession to the European Union, and you know, I was, and that it's not only from the opposition, even the government at the highest level, they had the same statement towards the European Commission and the European Union. I was foreign minister of my country when we went through accession negotiations. You know, it's a very difficult process. It's a very tedious process. You have to be patient, you have to be systematic, you have to include all the society into those negotiations. Transport, agriculture, fisheries, everything. And during that time, none of those 10 countries asked for dates, asked for deadlines. It even didn't occur to anybody. So please don't think that Serbia is a target of some bad feelings from the European Commission or from Brussels or something. No, it was, we didn't get anything for free when we were negotiating. Commission, played some tricks on us. You have to be ready for that. It's negotiations. You give and you take, and you have to be ready for that. You have to know very much what is satisfactory for you, what will do good for your country, and you should be hard-headed as well. So we all had to go through the same demanding process. So please don't think that because we don't want to give you the dates, it doesn't work like that, simply. We were negotiating, we were doing our best. Slovakia was 2 years behind the first 6 countries. And in the end, all 10 countries, when we were ready, when we really fulfilled the criteria, we were admitted to the EU. The next round of enlargement was not so good. We all remember it, and we would never like to repeat it. Romania and Bulgaria. At that time, political criteria got preference to technical criteria, fulfillment of all technical criteria. It backfired very badly, and nobody wants to repeat it. So I can understand you, and I'm telling it back in the European Parliament that when you deliver, we should also deliver. If we are coming up with some additional requirements, that's not fair. We are undermining our credibility if we are doing it. And that's what we can promise you very seriously, that this is going to change and there will be no unless there will be no more time or more requirements. 100% is enough. Sometimes we were asking for 120. That's wrong. That's not going to be repeated. But my plea to you is, please, I hope that I don't have to bring time and again my credentials that I'm a friend of Serbia, and I wish all the best for your country, and not only wish, but I'm trying to do. But please don't feel that you are the bad child or bad boy and we are doing all kind of bad things to you. No, that's not the case. Thank you.
Hvala gospodine kopredsedavajući, gospođo Joksimović.
Dragi...
Mrs. Joksimović. Dear Edward, respected him, I think that nobody in Serbia perceives itself or themselves as victims. I don't know why you think that we see ourselves as victims. You have to understand, since you're a serious politician and you were a foreign minister of your country in negotiation times, in the past 15 years, some previous governments were circulating among the public 4 or 5 possible accession dates. 2004, 2007, 2009, 2011. And this created a high level of expectations, followed by a high level of disappointment with the public. With the reality. We didn't insist on dates, but managing time and managing the expectations, that's why we said we would like to have a more clear time frame, not a set date, but some sort of idea of the time frame. That's how we understood the message by Juncker that 2025, albeit this is not carved in stone as our membership date, is a foreseeable time frame so that we can bring the citizens back into this positive attitude regarding our possible membership. You, as an experienced politician, do understand why it was so important for us to have a more clear time frame. Thank you. Mr. Rističević. Thank you. As member of a small country, agricultural party, I'm a small party. I have the last word, was given the word last, since the union is based on steel and agriculture. Since I'm representing agriculture, I want to have the word. The opposition is right regarding the assembly, situation in the assembly. We are respecting their rule of procedures that they have adopted once upon a time. We have no courage to change the rules of procedure that the former opposition left us. We had 160 amendments to our agenda. And so the opposition is giving themselves political slogans, or some titles of the laws are not acceptable. So we don't change the rules of procedure in the assembly. Don't know why. Independent judiciary, again, opposition, is their party right? The famous reform from 2003, which I call the deformation of judiciary, was again on party lines, and we have done nothing. We lack courage to deal with the former opposition because they did it, and we are not judging the freedom of speech. I am judged for the freedom of speech. So we appointed only a few judges in the parliament, so no single party leader did file a criminal charges for something he said in the assembly, but one opposition leader who has its representative here said he sued 10 members of parliament for what they were saying in the house here. So if they're talking about freedom of speech, then I'm puzzled. We are talking about freedom of speech and we have criminal proceedings. 9 were rejected, only mine, one against me, was processed. So they should say that the only MP who is being brought to trial for what he said here in the Assembly is myself. So then I can say that the judiciary is not independent, and the reform from 2009, we had the position that opposition MPs are using their judges to judge the MPs from the position. I think also our media are too free. We have too much media freedom. I am from a small party, I don't have my journalists, and I have to say they wanted the state to leave the media, the state left the media, and now they want the same state, on behalf of independent journalism, to influence private media. And if the state influences private media, this is censorship in my books. And if we have too much freedom, then big capital is sending messages via media, but we have too little market, and medias are numerous and they compete with titles and so on, headlines, tabloids, and this is all endangering political situation in the country. We have too many people calling themselves journalists. And to make it even more comical, we have opposition leaders who are complaining about the lack of media freedoms, but they're selecting the journalist who's going to come to their press conferences, who's a journalist, who's not, and everybody represents the media, and they say you don't have the right to leave, and so on. Here in the Assembly it happened. Then an opposition leader, this association or a party present here, said to some people, "You are not journalists, I don't want to answer your questions." I didn't see anybody from the opposition or our Prime Minister or the President to behave like that to the journalists. Not a single person from the government coalition attacked journalists, as Mrs. Uzelas did. Private media can favor opposition position, but if we influence them, then we are in a trap. Also, state television, if we can influence them as a majority, we didn't change a single editor on television in 5 years. We have all political. Some opposition leaders have their spouses working in national television. We didn't change anybody, or we seriously didn't demand this. So we could have influenced the state broadcaster, but we didn't influence on the state broadcaster. The opposition needs to understand that the media in favor of ruling parties is not independent, but neither is the media who is favoring the opposition. But the opposition here thinks that if the media is favoring opposition, it is a free media. If the media outlet is favoring the ruling parties, then they are not free. I am thankful to the opposition for the criticisms more than for their praises. The opposition has the right to criticize, and we have European values, and the opposition can complain.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of comments, very quick on the time frame. The date of 25 was set by President Juncker as a midterm agenda for a number of issues that will concern the future of Europe. Question of the Schengen area, question of the Eurozone reform, foreign and defense policy, and enlargement. So it's not a date for the enlargement. It's a horizon where the President was urging the other members of the Union of his vision, and he said by 2025 we will need to do this. Now, certainly it's important to have a time frame because it's you put some parameter there, but I would like to urge that at least from my point of view, the deadline are much before than that. A number of legislation is in the Parliament to be adopted as a part of the commitment the government has made, and this will be reflected by the negotiator, by the Commission very regularly. So the next progress report will be on April 2018, where the Commission is already working to make a photograph of all the steps that Serbia has done on all 35 chapters. And the closing date will be end of February. So whatever Serbia will have done by the 28th of February will be reflected in every report. So on my side, I agree that important is debate on the time frame, the horizon 2025. There's a number of deadlines that come much earlier, and some of them become very, very urgent. So if I can close on urging the Parliament to accelerate its work, to make this legislation passed, with the contribution of the civil society, of the opposition, of the majority, so as the Commission can capture and make a recommendation for the future of the work. Thank you.
Zahvaljujem. Prijavili su se za reč još gospodin Bogović i gospođa Filipovski. Podsjećam da je 18:30, pa ćemo zaključiti.
Thank you. Madam Filipovski has also asked for the floor. Mr. Bogović first. Please mind the time. Thank you. I shall try to speak in this language that I believe all of us understand in Serbia. I will start by saying this. When I listened to this debate, I was intending to talk more about regional development, but I also talked about with the NGOs. So if we go back into history, just a comment regarding the end of the Second World War. 5 years after the Second World War, a reconciliation in the region by Adenauer, Schuman, and De Gasperi. Many people had perished before that over the years, and it took these wise men 5 years to have these people reconcile after the Second World War. After the Second World War, the only war in Europe actually took place precisely here, whatever we call this region, the former Yugoslavia. So it is high time that we put that behind us and head for the future. I became the mayor of Krško 6 years prior to our accession to the EU. So I learned something on the municipal level and now in the European Parliament and European politics. When we were part I actually entered Serbia for the first time from independent Slovenia in Bajina Bašta. That was in 2001 after Milosevic. And I did think that these things would evolve at a faster pace. Slovenia did accede at a different time. The political scene was different. This was an enlargement of 10 countries in one fell swoop. But what we had to fulfill was exactly what Mr. Hochmar has said. Don't forget what Mr. Kukan has said. We did not put requirements to the EU. We did not want to change the European Union as sometimes here. This is not a story about big and small countries. This is a story about principles. And the narrative is about principles. What it is the most important for you in addition to these basic values, the human rights, the basic rights, media, corruption, are the principle of solidarity and the principle of subsidiarity. And thereby we come to my basic subject, which is that this principle in Europe involves 70% of the budget for the rural development, for agrarian agricultural development, because of solidarity and the principle of subsidiarity. This is how we help those who need such help. So Serbia, talking about these projects, will be getting, I don't know, 200 euros, whereas some other countries receive different sums, increasing the difference between the countries that are members and those that are still not members of the EU. Therefore, I think we should steer clear of these emotions and prehistoric things and head for some practical solutions. Because when I see that Serbia, this figure has dropped from, say, 15 million to 8 million, this is a deterioration of the situation. If we have these countries that have joined the EU, the market, and the most important market in the EU is the human capital market, as far as I see it. So unless we move forward along these lines where it is possible, the European Union is the very best thing which can happen to you in terms of the market. And this means that you need to really put in an effort and an input towards that objective. So if we talk about all these things that we have been talking about for the past 2 hours, I'm afraid what will happen to this territory in 15 years. And I'm talking about an event in the European Union. I've said this to the NGOs. I am a friend of Serbia, and I wish to help Serbia. I do believe that it is possible for Serbia to join the EU, and I want to help. I have learned something on this path about plurality, so do not perceive everything in black and white or white terms, with or without Vučić. I'm not with or against or in favor of Vučić. I want to work for you to see what can be done for everybody from Serbia. So everybody who comes from Serbia will always come to an open door as far as my support is concerned. So I think we should overcome these kinds of discussions, leave them behind, but see how we can actually address the basic essential issues for people living in this part of Europe. And I know how it is to live in this part of Europe, and I know what happened in the 90s. And so does the European Union. So therefore, this door is open. But as I've said, Mr. Hoekman and Mr. Kukan has said this is a circle that has specific rules within this club. We do have quarrels and differences of opinion which need to be overcome and addressed. But we should nevertheless seek a meeting of minds and a common agreement. And the most of the work has to be done within your country to do that. That's it from me. Yes, thank you, Madam Filipovski. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask for the floor first and foremost to respond to Madam Fayon's input, and I'm glad that she's back to hear some of my answers. You said probably from what you talked with the media, the professional media living in a hostile environment. First of all, I should like to say this. There are over 2,000 media in Serbia, so it's a diverse scene. Everybody writes freely what they want. Every day we read criticism leveled at the Prime Minister, at the ministers, at the President, at the level of the ruling party, and as often as not on a personal basis. From 2008 to 2012, I was in the opposition, and the party which I represented had very transparent contracts with some individual media. They followed our work, covered our work, but they did not convey what we said. So this is something which is not happening today. Serbia has made much headway along those lines, in fact. Also, you mentioned rightly pre-accession funds and the greater utilization of them, which Serbia should have. I know for a fact that in cooperation with the Republican government, For many years now, and especially over the past 1 year, the local self-governments have been increasingly trained to better utilize pre-accession funds. Serbia is a sovereign and independent country committed to Europe. We often mention China, Russia, etc., but our strategic objective, of course, is the European Union, but cooperation with other countries also goes without saying. As regards parliamentary work, for the sake of the truth, let me say a few things. The opposition tabled 600 amendments with the same text, which is deleted. And then that same opposition does not come when the voting on that particular legislation is taking place. The opposition says that the governing majority is just a voting machine. And now it is news that the ruling majority used this time not to allow the opposition to speak, and it is not news that by this budget we actually increased pensions and salaries and allowances for newborn children and other increases, and that our objective is financial recovery and the return of a large number of people who are living abroad to come back to Serbia. I have to mention the example of Croatia, which recently became a member of the European Union, and after 3 years its citizens could work in the European Union. A large number of citizens from Croatia go to Germany and Belgium because of the better conditions there. That's it.
Hvala, gospođo Filipovski. Završavamo sa radnim delom.
Thank you, Madam Filipovski. This is the end of the working part of our first day. As of 8 o'clock, we have our dinner tomorrow, which will start at 9 o'clock with the speeches of Madam Fajon and Madam Kovac. That's agenda item number 3. Before that, please help yourself to some refreshments, which are